I'm chairman of 1848 Housing, and on the call with us tonight, we have members of our 1848 Housing and 1848 Properties Committee and Board, including John Ziza, Jason Fitzgerald, and Jim Lee. I want to welcome you to tonight's program. We're really excited. We have been doing webinars for you every other month for almost 2 years now. And this topic, I think, is one that's exciting to me in that we're going to really kind of focus on two areas. One is how to make 2020 your best housing year ever. And then we also want to have a time for open discussion on various House Corporation topics, whether that's regarding the pandemic or house operations or renovations or fundraising. We want to have a time to be interactive with you. So if you have questions or thoughts, I want to encourage you to be thinking about those. Dio, are we going to be typing those in? You want to explain that process so people can start generating questions?
So, brothers, by all means, feel free to use the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen to type out your questions. However, we would like to treat this, like Steve said, as more of a discussion. So when the time comes for the discussion portion, I'll actually unmute all participants and essentially allow you to self-mute yourself, unless you have a question or want to chime into the discussion, just so we can kind of keep it more as a discussion format rather than moderator to panelist type of discussion.
Perfect. Thanks, Dio. And thanks to Dio, as always. He's our man behind the scenes that sends the reminders and mans the controls. So we couldn't do this without you, Dio. So thanks. Brothers, before we jump into the actual presentation, I do also just want to again say thank you. I say this every time I have an opportunity to share with you guys, but we do appreciate your work. We appreciate your enthusiasm and passion for Phi Gamma Delta and for housing. And we understand that this has gotten complicated because of the pandemic, and it's more complicated than ever. And so we know that you're putting in a lot of hours, you're learning and figuring a lot of things out that none of us had ever guessed that we might have to understand or figure out, and we appreciate you. So I just want you to know that, and I don't want that to be a last minute afterthought. I want it to be right up front. Phi Gamma Delta appreciates you, 1848 Housing appreciates you, so thank you. Okay, let's jump into our prepared comments, and then we'll go through these and then jump into our open discussion. Can we go to the first slide, Theo? This is something actually a Phi Gamma brother shared with me over 30 years ago, and I've really held this thought close to my heart and mind as a business owner and as just I guess as a regular person, and even talking to my kids. And the notion of success coming from doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. I think one of the things that we can get tricked into at times is overcomplicating things, thinking that, I've got to do this fancy maintenance plan, or I got to do this complex budget or complex analysis, and in order to do something extraordinarily well. And the truth is, I've learned, at least in my life, in my role running a company for the last 20 years, running almost a $40 million company before that, really success is really about doing the ordinary things and not overlooking them and doing them really completely well. And so that's just an overriding thought I want to just start out with. On our next slide, what we're going to do is talk about the ordinary things in these areas that can help make 2020 be your best year ever. So we're going to talk about the ordinary things in finances, operations, safety, food service, planning, and communications. Okay, so let's jump in and talk about finances. One of the things that is one of the most basic and ordinary thing that you can do to ensure your future success is make sure that you're charging market rates. And so we're obviously already committed for 2020, 2021, but in the next few months, for some of you, maybe even in the next few weeks, depending what your campus's environment is, you're going to be starting the next round of housing contracts and getting commitments from brothers. And it's what we want to encourage you to do is make sure that you're charging market rates. You're putting yourself at such a financial handicap if you're 20 or 30 or 40% below market. And I get, and we'll maybe talk about this in the open session, that in some cases, maybe our houses aren't, on par with the greatest and best housing that's available on your campus. And you might feel that you can't charge the same as the dorms or the same as local apartments. But you should be, able to get there, get close. And certainly have a goal to work your way up to being at market. Part of this process for Phi Gamma Delta, we're participating more and more in interfraternal housing-related discussions. And I'll give you an example that for the housing owned by SAE, they charge not less than 95% of what the dorms charge. That's their flat out rule for the 17 houses they own. So there are groups that, use dorms, which generally can be more expensive, as a benchmark for what they should charge. And so I just want to encourage you to take the pulse of what's going on in your campus, find out from your peers on other house corporations or through the IFC what the rates being charged for both room and board, and compare yourselves and compare the quality of the housing that they have to yours, compare the quality of the food to what you're providing, and make sure that you're charging as much as you can, because to the next point, one of the other things that will help make your 2020 better and beyond is building your cash reserves. Cash on hand is a beautiful thing, right? When you're running a business operation, and your house corporation is a business operation. It's surprising the number of our chapter or house corporations, I should say, that have little to no cash on hand. We did a survey just over a year ago, and the typical house corporation has under, I think it was 40-some% had less than $25,000 in cash on hand. And so that's obviously not optimal, right? We need to be budgeting when we're developing our rental rates and our food service costs, building in for contingencies, building in for long-term reserves, short-term reserve kinds of things, so that we can meet the unexpected needs that come up, whether it's a pandemic and needing extra cleaning supplies, or whether it's a surprise that the boiler is not working any longer and we need to make a premature repair or replacement. So building your cash reserves is an area that we want to encourage you to focus on. Our next slide, in terms of operations, we think there's a couple areas here that are part of those ordinary things that we want to encourage you to do better, or at least evaluate to see if you can do them better. One of those is how you oversee your vendors and your operations. Do you have a clear plan on how you review and evaluate and enhance the performance of your vendors? Part of that means that you're going to need to understand enough about their world to be able to double check them to make sure that they're following the right standards in general. So if it's your food service vendor, you need to know enough about kitchen operations so that you can open the freezer or the refrigerator and know that everything's supposed to be labeled and it's supposed to have a date on it. If you don't know those things, then you can't really oversee that vendor effectively. You can't, if you don't know what the temperature that your dishwasher is supposed to be operating at, then you can't hold them accountable to make sure that they're managing that correctly for you. So again, this is areas where 1848 housing can, I think, help you. We also have some vendors on the call, some partners, and we can maybe get some input from them on proper ways that, or maybe even tools that they provide for their clients to help evaluate and review their performance. But the other part of this is also being familiar enough with your contracts with these vendors to know what they're supposed to be doing and making sure that they're delivering everything that's promised in the contract. If we're just kind of in status quo mode and, oh yeah, the chef's been here for 10 years and, we don't get any complaints, so we don't bother showing up and looking in the kitchen, it probably means you're going backwards and you're not likely advancing your programs and success. So we want you to encourage you to look at this area. Setting a higher standard for your chapter is the next idea that we want to share with you. I'm hopeful that you feel like you have the best men on campus as members of your local chapter. And I think, I think we do a great job recruiting, and we do get top men. And so we should be able to have high expectations from these men in regards to how they care for the house, how they care for the safety features and keeping them intact and operational, for following the rules and expectations that the house corporation has, whether that's about roof access or fire escape access. And so we want you to encourage you to think about the expectations that you share with the chapter and think about whether you can, you need to or should increase those expectations from them. Having members of your board become experts in specific areas. That's another area that we want to suggest that you consider operationally. Getting more men involved. We have a lot of house corporations that do a great job really working as a committee, and we have a lot of Lone Rangers, and then some of those Lone Rangers are lucky enough to have a Tonto to be their sidekick and help them. And but we probably have less that really do have 4 or 5 men divvying up responsibilities fairly equally, and taking different aspects and becoming sort of experts or specialists in those areas. And we think that's a great thing for Phi Gamma Delta. It's a great thing for your house corporation, so that if somebody has to step back, you're not down cutting your active force by 50% when one of the 2 people goes away or has to step back from their duties. Operationally, another area that we want to encourage you to check and make sure that you're doing ordinary things extraordinarily well is following your local employment rules. I think a lot of us can probably remember the day when, everything was pretty loose and you could just, ask the chef to stay longer and not really worry about overtime or consequences to HR laws or rules. Or we could perhaps trade services with a brother in return for being house manager and not have to worry about compensation and withholding and things like that. It's important. Every state does things slightly different, and we need to make sure that we're operating our house corporations within the guidelines of what the local and state rules are for where you are located. So we want to just encourage you to continue to raise your awareness in that regard. Operationally, a great challenge is to make a point to have the house be cleaner than ever this year. I think it's easy to settle in this regard. And hey, it's okay. It's not great. It's not awful. We've had lots of different people tell us different standards. Hey, would your wife be happy walking into the chapter house and seeing it this way? Would the men's moms be happy if they saw the conditions their son was living in? But however standard or benchmark or thought process you want to have, can we have the house be cleaner than ever this year would be a great way to make 2020 one of the best years ever for your chapter house. And then finally, setting a goal to make repairs on an even more timely basis. I think we've all experienced the frustration of holes in the walls and broken doors and door hinges and broken glass and things like that. There's a pretty well-known concept that says when things start to get run down, people generally will take less good care of the asset going forward. So it's important to be timely with your repairs so that that hole is patched and painted and fixed in the shortest amount of time, so that the attitude doesn't become, oh, well, there's already one hole, what's a big deal if we get another one, or we break another piece of glass, or the kitchen cabinet, and this one is broken, and now this next one's broken, so this, is getting ratty. We don't have to really treat this nicely. And so the faster you can make repairs, that changes the attitude and mindset of the people living there to take better care of it, because they see that everything gets fixed in a very timely manner. So that would be an area operationally that we would encourage you to consider. Let's go to our next area and talk about safety. I have to tell you, brothers, I've been through 3, I think, presentations by both the major insurance players from in the Greek world, and the statistics and the amount of payouts that are being made due to safety issues are staggering. And I'm not talking about hazing related claims. I'm talking about fire losses and falls and those kinds of things. We just have to be as passionate as possible when it comes to safety. And I hope all of you, and I'm sure all of you, have a not on my watch type of mindset when it comes to safety. We don't want anybody hurt on our watch running the house corporation or in 1848 properties. And so to that end, we want to encourage you to perform regular safety walkthroughs of the house. We want you to set high expectations for your house manager to do that as well. And make sure that somebody from the house corporation is regularly doing this, and we should have a zero tolerance for problems when in safety area, and we should be adopting you know, an extremely fast response time to repair any safety related issue. We just, you know, that's just really what we need to do today, right? There's, you know, we don't want our sons or daughters to be in a fraternity or sorority house and have experience, you know, any kind of a problem that could have been hopefully fixed or been resolved. So want to encourage you to be as diligent as ever, or more diligent than ever in 2020 when it comes to safety. We have a couple areas that we've introduced over the last few months with you, and they're listed below. These are low-cost ways to reduce safety risks that are come up regularly with the insurance companies. The number of people that fall from a roof is staggering, and the claims that are paid for that are staggering. So we need to restrict or alarm access to our roofs. And if it's legal, and you should obviously make sure that you're within your safety code, if you're allowed to padlock a door that or an access hatch to a roof, then it should be locked. And it should be very restrictive on who, if anybody, can have access to the roof. Same thing with fire escapes. The falls from fire escapes happen every year around the Greek system, and fire escapes aren't a back entrance. They aren't a way to ditch from a chapter meeting. They're an emergency tool, and the only time they should be ever used is in case of an emergency. And so again, within the bounds of what's legal for your fire code where you are, they ought to be, access ought to be restricted or alarmed so that you know when people are using that inappropriately. Not allowing permanent use of extension cords. That's I'm pretty sure that's a national fire standard when you have your fire safety inspection. I'm pretty sure that's common, but what's also sometimes common is that the chapter says we're going to have our fire inspection, so make sure you aren't using any extension cords, and then the next day they come back, and that's what we should not allow. And so that's part of the safety inspection that the house chapter officers and house manager should be looking for, as well as the house corporation. Consider providing surge protectors. You know, one of the things that we know our aging houses weren't built with electrical systems that anticipated the kinds of electronic use that we have, and a surge protector can help trip an overload and prevent, you know, a big problem. And so, you know, for a small amount of money, the house corporation could, you know, provide a surge protector for every room, and hopefully prevent a problem. And so we encourage you to think about that. Timely fire evacuation drills. I'm sure, again, probably that's part of most of your local city ordinances for a structure like ours, but you ought to be making sure that you do that, and that you do it well and you do it seriously. And we want to encourage you to make sure that that's done timely at the start of the semester. And keeping hallways, stairwells clear of storage items, that's a huge issue. You know, a lot of the chapter houses don't have a lot of extra room for golf clubs and bikes and skis and all the things that brothers want to bring. And they end up getting put in hallways and stairwells. And it's a problem. And the last thing, again, that we ever want to have happen is, you know, for a tragedy to happen, the lights go out, it's dark, and then people are clogged in a stairwell that they couldn't egress from because there was things that shouldn't have been there. So these are again, low cost, simple things that we can just have a high awareness of and make a huge impact in the safety of our structures. Let's go to the next slide, Dio. Supervising your food service program better. I kind of touched on an example of that, but we should be doing this from the area of safety, health, and quality. So that means periodically coming in and tasting the food, making sure that you're talking to the brothers and making sure they're happy with the quality, the quantity, the taste of the food. And then it goes back to having some knowledge. We did a quiz in the newsletter in May. I don't know if many of you saw that, but we had, I think, 20 questions that our great partner Upper Crust helped us put together regarding kitchen operations, and questions about do you know what the right temperature for refrigeration or freezing your freezer should be set to, or how much time should your food be out in the cold well. So, you know, from a health and safety standpoint, you need to have some of that knowledge so that you can hold your vendor accountable, whether it's your local hired chef or your contract food service program. Looking for ways to elevate your food service program is a great way to differentiate yourself, and we hope that, you know, again, you'll move your food service program forward. We're a big believer in outsourcing this for a lot of different reasons, and Upper Crust is proving to be a fantastic partner for Phi Gamma Delta. So we encourage you, whether you're running it locally, to look at ways you can elevate your food service, and if you're interested, consider one of our partners in this area. Okay, next category is communication. We've talked about this for a couple years now, brothers, but the truth is this is an area that still, I think, eludes a lot of our house corporations. What we know from a fundraising standpoint is that to maximize your potential success for fundraising, you need to have consistent and regular communications with your graduate brothers for 2 years or longer. And so what that means is, before you're ready to start fundraising, you have to have had that tradition of engaging them. And frankly, that's part of your mission. That's part of your role as a fiduciary, being on the house corporation. You're the managing brothers for an asset that's owned by the chapter on behalf of all the graduates. And so if you're not communicating with your shareholders, so to speak, then you're not fulfilling your obligation as a fiduciary. And so we want to just encourage you to think about improving your communications. We have a webinar on the website that talks about the ideal communication plan using both print and social media and email communication. Phi Gamma Delta headquarters has some resources, and Dio can be somebody that you can connect with in the days or weeks ahead, and he can get you connected with the communication teams at headquarters if you need some help with that. But this is definitely an area that we want to encourage you to be thinking about and focusing on improving. Next slide. Planning. Running a house corporation is a big job. You know, I shared this in a ecclesia-related presentation earlier this week, but really for any of you, the men on the call that are have a house that's got, you know, 50 people living in it, and you have food service, you're really running a small boutique hotel. You've got, the full gamut of not only maintaining the property and dealing with guests and running a restaurant, but you have planning and communication and all those things. And so you think about it, those boutique hotels are run by professionals that have corporate entities behind them, and you're doing this as a volunteer. So again, our thanks. It's a huge job. And it's easy, I think, to just get caught up in the day-to-day aspects and let that consume all your time and not leave you time for planning. And so a couple of the areas that we just want to touch on from a planning basis that we think it's a part of those ordinary things that will help you be extraordinarily successful. One is reserve study. If your house corporation doesn't have a reserve study, it's something that we want to encourage you to make a priority and complete in 2020. A reserve study, in short, really is a list of all the components of your house, long and short term, from your roof to your boiler to your fence to your light fixtures, your doors, your windows, all the component parts of your house. And the reserve study tool is in an Excel format, and you can plug in numbers, and it helps you evaluate what the life of each of those elements are, and then it calculates using an inflation number that you can plug in yourself what the future cost will be to replace that item. So if you have a roof that's $50,000 today, what will that roof cost to replace in 25 or 30 years with a 2 or 3% inflation? And then it helps you calculate what that number is so that you can start saving today 1/30th of that amount, so that you're not caught flat-footed 30 years from now saying, oh crap, we have a $80,000 roof to replace. What are we going to do? Where do we have that money? Having a maintenance plan. Hopefully all the people on the call could pull out a maintenance plan today. What's your schedule for routine types of items, for carpet cleaning, for deep cleaning your bathrooms, for refinishing wood floors, for painting? Those are things that should be scheduled out. There should be known costs or estimated costs for those things, and they're critical for keeping the house looking great and making people feel like the house is well cared for. And then lastly, plan for major and minor renovations. Again, this shouldn't sneak up on you. You should have 5, 10, 25-year plans that you're going to be doing certain aspects of renovations or even rebuilding your house. And so that's a really important aspect, both for a lot of the things that we touched on, for building up reserves, for communication. So we want to encourage you to make sure that you have at least these 3 plans as part of your mix when it comes to your ongoing operations. Okay, Dio, let's hit the next slide. So, brothers, as a close to the formal part of the conversation, we hope that you'll take a look at and consider some of the things that we covered today in the areas of finance, operations, planning, safety, and take some time at your next meeting and ask yourselves how you're doing in those categories, and if there's a few of those items that you can tackle, or if you're willing and able to tackle all those items. We really think that those will make a huge difference for you in your success in a short-term basis, and will have a profound impact on the long-term success of your house corporation. Okay, so we are going to switch gears and go into open discussion mode. Um, uh, One thing, by the way, that we're in the process of doing, John Ziza is just wrapping up, I think, getting close, right, John? Is providing some information for you on preparation regarding COVID. If you haven't, we've had some requests. We've been collecting samples from different universities. Some universities weeks ago have provided information, and other universities still haven't provided any. And so what we're seeing some similarities, but there's obviously nuances. So what we've started doing is collecting these, and we'll be able to make them available to you. So if your university hasn't provided you with definitive information, you know, you can see what some of the other universities are requiring and get started. I'm sure every university is going to need a plan from chapters and house corporations, for instance, on how they plan to handle quarantining somebody that gets sick with COVID. And so I'd be shocked if that wasn't a requirement at every university. So where the cleaning standards might be different, or the expectations might be different, you know, there's going to be some of these elements that are common. So if you have received some of this information from your university, we'd love for you to share that with us. The email, you can send it to DO. That's what all those letters actually spells. It's kind of crazy, but it's, yeah, DIO, DO. And at phigam.org, you actually have to write all the letters. But if you'll send them in, and then if you want to see others of those, also email DO, and he'll give you instructions on how to receive those copies, or he'll send them out to you. Okay, Jason, Jim, John, let's get you guys involved in this next phase. Let's see what we have in the way of questions and comments. Dio, you want to unmute brothers? And I don't know if we've gotten any written in yet. Have we gotten anything written in?
Yeah, so brothers, before I unmute everyone, I did want to prompt some quick introductions for our experts on the call. We do have with us from our food service provider, Shayna Smith from Upper Crust Food Services with us. From our suggested vendors concerning project management, we have Steve Ratterman from CSL Management and Martin Smith from Alpha Fraternity Management. So brothers, I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. Again, if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself, you know, and let's start the discussion.
So one of the questions, we'll wait for everybody to unmute, to Alpha, Upper Crust, and CRS. One question that I wanted to pose to all of you guys is there such a thing as a latest date for one of your companies to start working with one of our house corporations for the fall? Steve, Martin, Shayna?
As far as, this is Steve Ratterman, Steve, and as far as we're concerned, we start working with people at all points throughout the year and the school year. So the time frame is not really relevant from our perspective. It's just a matter of identifying the need and helping meet it. So
Great.
Steve, this is Shannon with Upper Crust, and you know, we'll follow kind of the same as CSL. You know, for us, we can start at any point. We can also, you know, hire on the kitchen staff. Some of it just may be a little bit of a could be a day of just if we're having to get groceries in and get some accounts set up, that kind of thing. But
Sure.
we have been, like a lot of us, we've been bringing on people up until the, 12th hour, and sometimes after they get back in and they kind of realize I've got to do something. So
Good.
Steve,
So,
Bill
Steve, it's
Oliver.
Martin Smith. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say similar. There is a transition period, and we do have a specific transition checklist of things that take to bring clients on or achieve the objectives and the things that you outlined, which you did a great job of, by the way. It was very concise, and if the house corporations can follow those outlines and complete those things, they'll have successful chapters. But as I said, we just negotiate with the client the phase-in period and get to work.
Good. And I bring that up, brothers, for those on the call or for those who watch this afterwards. Particularly with the pandemic, I mean, this can get pretty overwhelming with some of the things that you have to face. And if you're of a mindset that you don't want to do this on your own, these companies that are on the call, we've got resources posted on our webpage under phigam.org, are great resources to help ease the burden for you, and so that you don't have to worry about employment issues with the chef, for instance, with the pandemic. And so that's why I brought that up in particular. So just wanted you to know, even at this late hour, if you're like, hey, I could use some help, at least offloading some part of the house operation to a professional company, we've got some great ones joining us tonight. Okay, how about some other questions or discussion topics?
Yeah, Steve, Bill Oliver, Phi Gamma at Penn State. We're having trouble getting our leases or contracts signed and sent back. And we only have a couple weeks to go, but the members are totally frightened about the university shutting down a couple of weeks, a month into school, and them having committed themselves to signing a contract for a semester.
Yeah.
Now, I tell them that trust has to go a long way. We actually did refund monies to them last spring when the university shut down after spring break.
Yeah.
But they're, I don't know, it's not the parents, it's the kids. And I call them kids because they are. And the comment before me was that the house corporation would do everything we want to do, but will they? That's the big question. But anyway, they've tried to put together their own budgets and think they're going to have X amount of kids into the house paying full rate. And then they've divided it by the number of days and figured, well, if a kid gets sick and leaves, he should get a pro rata refund. And I try to explain to them that it doesn't work that way. There are ongoing costs. It's fall, it's going to be winter, there's heat, electricity, insurance, taxes. There's, things that they don't think about, that they don't care about them. Then we have our large group of out-of-house members that, since there's going to be no socials whatsoever at Penn State fall time and no events whatsoever, they don't want the out-of-house students or the out-of-house members don't want to pay anything. They don't understand that there are charges. There's charges from the international that have to be paid. How do you educate them in a short period of time? I tried. We had a Zoom with, must have been 30 guys on it the other night. And a couple of guys have big mouths and influence everybody, but there's a lot they don't understand.
Good. I do have some answers, and I think we have some members on our panel that do. But before we share, how about some other men that are on the call? Are you also experiencing this, or have you handled this? And can you share some thoughts on what you've done in your location?
Steve, this is Martin. I guess I'm unmuted with Alpha. So what we've seen with a lot of our chapters addresses exactly with what Bill is talking about, that we work with the chapters to establish to the undergraduates essentially a minimum budget or a break-even number that the House Corporation and the undergraduates can agree to. Because Bill is, 100% correct that they're not thinking that, you've got to maintain the house with your fixed costs, your insurance, your property taxes, mortgage rates, etc. So you can come and develop a minimum rate and establish what that minimum rate is between between guys that live in and the live outs. I think this is a great opportunity to kind of readdress the fact that if you are on campus where the live outs aren't contributing a lot to the property costs, to kind of reestablish that thought process that all the members belong and are responsible for supporting the fraternity house. And there's certainly campuses like Texas and SEC campuses where the live out carry a major share of the load of running the chapter house. So it's not, it is unique to specific areas of the country. But there's certainly areas of the country, Bill, where the live outs are geared and the process is that they carry their share of the load.
Okay.
And we had one house did an amazing job of a great way of doing that is what Steve addressed before, is in communication and communicating to the parents that there is a minimum cost, and that one of our houses at Washington State did a very good job of breaking things down by members. In other words, if 40 guys live in, or we have 40 guys participating, it's this. If it's 25 guys, it's this. Less than 25, it's this. And so they put that number out in a communication to the members and to the parents, and we're very clear about it, and that helped get a lot of buy-in.
Great.
Steve, this is Steve Radman. I'd like to add what Martin was saying there, because I think he's hit it right on the point. But I think transparency is the key issue here with the parents and the members, up to the point that you can provide that transparency. We don't believe in opening up the checkbook to them, but we do believe that within reason, transparency and the communication piece are the two biggest items to getting that buy-in that you're looking for there. And it's a process. I think Martin did a good job indicating that too. Some schools is very easy, but in some schools we have to retrain people on the expectations of what it means to be a part of a fraternity or sorority, unfortunately. And it is a financial commitment, whether you're in the house or not, whether we're alumni or collegians. So I think that's the critical point that we have to get across as well. And that comes from communication and staying in touch with your members.
So this is Doug Mitchell from DePaul, and I'd like to make a couple of quick suggestions on this. The overarching difference between living in a dorm and living in a fraternity is that you're not a tenant, you're a member. And as a member, you have a responsibility to contribute what is necessary to keep the house alive and prospering. And then in terms of breaking down the costs and all, frankly, IHQ's direction that we should have a separation between the house core and the chapter has been very helpful for us. We charge rent, and the rent is a number, and that number has to go on because frankly, we have a big honking mortgage. But the point is that as a member, you are responsible for that, regardless of whether you're living in the house or not. And so on that basis, I think it's pretty self-evident, and it works out pretty well if you can display not only the operation of the house, which is our perspective in this group, but also the social budget and all the other perquisites that go into the House bill that have very little to do with what the House Corps does. It has everything to do with what the boys themselves decide they want to do. And we find that those expenses are absolutely not linear with the passage of time, because Fiji Isle comes at a particular time of the year, and lots of other examples. So, you know, you as a member, you make a commitment to support that social budget. It's not renting an apartment.
Real quick, tell us, so do you have one contract with the chapter? Do you also do individual contracts with the members, or do you
That's
just
what we do.
contract with
Yeah,
the chapter?
room contracts with each of the brothers. And frankly, that contract is with the chapter.
Okay.
We
That's what we
go
do.
over, yeah, we approve that, and frankly, we write that room contract. But it is a completely separate thing, and we've been very helped by the fact that when someone starts to come at the House Corp about, you know, what are you going to do about this or that, we say, hey, that's not our contract. Our contract is a lease. That's it, folks. Go call the president.
We have two
Yeah,
different at Penn State
Steve,
also.
Martin, and that concept does, I mean, there's, again, that concept we found to work very well in communicating to the undergraduates what their obligation is. And we found it very helpful that having the officer simply communicate that this is a lump sum number that we owe the House Corporation, and in the individual room contracts, that number is detailed, and so that they're aware that if they don't come up with that number's coming from either somewhere else in the budget or assessment or whatever.
Right.
So that, and again, what Steve was saying, I think is very, very important with this generation of students, is transparency and clarity is really a key thing to getting things accomplished.
Yep. Other House Corporation members like to chime in on this topic?
Yes, Tom from Michigan.
Hey, Tom.
I'd like to make a housekeeping comment.
Okay.
If you're not talking and are not ready to talk, please mute yourself, because the background noise is distracting. Thank you. Now, I love this conversation about whether members are joining the fraternity or not. This is a major issue up at Michigan. We have developed a culture up there where the upperclassmen need to live out. And we have turned the house living solely over to the underclassmen, i.e. sophomores. This is not a good situation. And I love the comments that people have been making about making a contract with the chapter that says, here's what's going to cost you to live in. You guys figure out how you're going to fill it. Because we have a couple of things that are happening at Michigan. They have what they have. There are some large apartments that the juniors and the seniors are renting. And they become the pre-party houses for the chapter. And this is how they abide by the you can't drink in the house policies that we have. They have their parties over at these other places. So they are really a vital element in the eyes of the undergraduates to live. But that constitutes maybe half of our enrollment. We still have another half of the people living out that are just doing it in independent apartments for whatever reasons they want. studying is probably the most legitimate reason that I have heard for these people to do that. But the other half are just living out so they can do their own thing on the thing. And I love the comments that people are making about they have a responsibility to the fraternity to support the house and to make sure that the house is part of their plans. Disregarding the comments about how much the brotherhood is so much better when you're living with 40 guys in the house that you can't compare that to an apartment. So I will stop my comments at that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Brothers, anybody else? You know, I think the original comment was dealing with the uncertainty of the pandemic and the possibility of closure or early closure. Has anybody specifically addressed that successfully within their chapter or with the chapters that they're working with?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Steve. This is Martin, sorry.
Okay. Well, I believe that the original question, and John, nod if I'm getting this wrong, would you? Shake your head no at me. But I think the original question posed was sort of a frustration of trying to get leases signed because of uncertainty with the pandemic and the possibility that classes could start a couple weeks later or the university could close at some point in the future. And so people were reluctant to sign their contract. And so I'm asking our other house corporations that are on the call if they've had some experience that they can specifically share on how they've addressed this with their chapters.
So Steve, I tried to address that. Sorry, this is Martin again. So groups are setting a minimum rate. So if people move in a contract, they're saying, let's say the semester rate is $5,000. They'll say, you know, the minimum rate is $3,000. We have to generate as a chapter, again, pick a number, $100,000 for the semester. And so if you are feeling that you're unsafe and the COVID situation is, and you need to leave, your refund is only going to be X. And you won't get a refund necessarily until the minimum obligations to the chapter are met. Okay. Other groups are going in and saying, you sign the lease, you're in. Other groups are doing what I said the Duke in Washington State did, where they did this phase-in group in terms of numbers to meet that number. So what most groups are doing is communicating to their undergraduates a, for lack of a better term, break-even number and negotiating how they're going to fund that number so that they remain
This is Steve Ratterman. We're seeing the same exact thing. It varies by property and by organization, but you know, kind of what they feel they need to do. But that's the same basic concept most of them are using. They're just being upfront and telling them what it's going to be, and they're putting it in the contract. Whatever the workout is for the semester, it goes in the contract, and that's the end of the story. So,
have you guys seen, and we'll maybe close out this question in a second here and move on to another area if there are any. I've seen some models where literally they've got 3-4 scenarios where, you know, if this if the university shuts down, then this triggers this type of refund or process. if you decide on your own that you're going to leave because you're just not comfortable anymore, that's a different scenario, right? You're making a choice to get out of the contract, and so it's a different type of response. In some cases, I've seen that where there's no refund, right? If you decide you're going to leave, then there's no refund. But if the university closes or there's rules that prevent us from operating, then there's a different set of circumstances that triggers for refunds or for getting out of contracts. Has anybody seen or done anything like that?
I'll say yes if I'm unmuted. It's Martin again. Sorry, Martin Smith. And what Steve said is it does, what we're trying to do is provide our clients with, kind of a menu option, and because they're gonna, each organization has a little bit of its own feeling. It seems I was on a conference call last night with a bunch of our clients, and they were saying, can you give us what your recommended boilerplate piece is? And that's really difficult because of how each organization kind of views their own situation in their own chapter. But yes, chapters are doing that. But as I said, there are chapters that saying we don't care what the university does. If you sign, you're in. And there are chapters that say if you feel it's unsafe and you leave, we'll give you a refund, to get people to sign and come in. So, the more transparent you can be and the better communication you give to the parents, the more success you're going to have getting your members to sign up.
Steve, this is Steve Reiterman again. I don't know that we've seen anybody give a blanket, if you're uncomfortable, you can leave and check out type agreement. It's been more of the, as you noted, if you decide to leave, it's your choice. But any refund or rebate clauses are dictated on everything we've seen on the university having to be shut down, whether it's a call by the university or a call by local officials, doesn't make any difference.
And brothers, we should also remember, right? If they're in an apartment complex, my bet would be that lease is in place, regardless of what the university, a landlord says you get a lease. It's 1 year. I don't care if the university shut down. We need to, obviously, we want to be sensitive and fair and reasonable with our brothers, but we also are running a business, and we need to look at the big world out there and how the big world is handling things. And the big world out there doesn't really care in a lot of cases about whether you want to leave school or not. If you've got an apartment lease, you got an apartment lease.
Steve, I think the only difference to that would be some of the privately owned student apartments that are student housing apartments specifically. And in your market, you should check and see what their policies are, because that's a big part of your competition. Not really the mom and pop's 4 flats, but some of these with all the ultra amenities and things. That's what we're competing against. And we don't have the swimming pool and the lazy river probably in your house.
You better not have a swimming pool.
But you are competing against that, so you need to see what their refund policies are in terms of lease cancellations.
Is there a general discussion or agreement if the university shuts down, should the fraternity house remain open or close with it?
Let's hear from our house corporations members. Anybody want to chime in on that? I know we've had houses stay open this summer, even though university shut down in some cases. So who can share some experiences from their situation?
At Michigan, I think if the university shut down their stuff, I think we would shut down the house and tell them to go home.
And give them a refund?
We need to think that through. I'm really enjoying the comments about the possible options for closing down. I think if the university shuts it down, I think we're dead meat, and really the kids shouldn't have to pay.
Of course, remember, shutting down means they're going to go to online learning, and then the people have to live somewhere, right? But I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you know, that still, you know, online learning requires a place to live too.
Yeah, no, that's a good variation on that. If the kids choose to live on campus with the online learning, I would consider that an acceptance to stay at the house.
So Steve, I can comment, this is Martin again, and in the West Coast, two things that you need to be aware of. One is places like Oregon and Washington and California are saying you don't have to pay your rent and you can't get kicked out. So we have that issue. And we're finding it on the campuses, and the 15 or so campuses or plus, that the students are, most of the Pac-10 conference schools and many of the other schools have gone to online learning, but the students want to be on campus. And the dorms aren't closed, the apartments are open, they're still doing dining services at the dorms. So, you know, we're accommodating that, and obviously as the COVID moves between various stages, if things level out and things go back down, obviously they're going to reconsider the ability to do, you know, and have classes.
Okay, is there another topic that somebody would like to bring up?
Hi, Tom again from Michigan. Does anybody know what the definition of a deep clean is?
Yes, but
I knew that laugh was coming.
yeah, Steve, you want to answer that one?
I think we'll let Steve or Steve. Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically, we refer to deep cleans as a clean that we do in the summer, and usually some version of it also at Christmas break, when the students or members are out of the house, most of their belongings are out of the house, so that we can get in and do a true deep clean in their bedrooms, get the floors clean, get all the dust and dirt and crap out of the corners and off the windowsills and off the window blinds, and just go in and really clean the house top to bottom. If you've got carpets, which in a fraternity house, I hope you don't, but if you do, we go in and clean those, clean upholstery. It's just cleaning and disinfecting the house as from top to bottom, inside and out, so that when the members move back in the fall or in January, they walk back into a clean facility, and hopefully much cleaner than what they left. I mean, sometimes it involves dumpsters. We've had situations at just in Michigan, and I'm sure Alpha has as well at Michigan, where we've had to have dumpsters for move in and move out. So we do that at many schools. We'll just roll up a 20-yard dumpster and ask the students to empty their trash in the rooms, and then we send a crew in after them to do the follow-up clean. So that's basically what a deep clean is. And is a lot of times it's just based on the size of the house and frankly the condition that the cleaning crew walks into. So for sororities, it's generally not too bad. For fraternities, we've seen it all over the board based on whatever the amount of trash and just filth that's in the house.
This is Shanna with Upper Crust, and so from the kitchen standpoint, we're looking for, when we think of a deep clean, of course, we are going, if you've got a property management company, they're a lot of times coordinating it. If not, it's the House Corporation Board. But for us, what we're hoping to see in the kitchen, it doesn't always happen, but a good tile scrub on the tile floor, the hood being serviced, the hood system being cleaned. Sometimes, they'll come in and, depending on what your walls are, wiping those down. We will always clean the kitchen, but then that deep clean is really getting in and, getting all the stuff serviced, which, the kitchen equipment needs to really be serviced once a year. We like it twice a year at the Christmas break if you can afford to do that. But we will generally just work with, if you're an independent house corporation board or if you're using a property management to make sure that it falls under that deep clean.
Great.
Yeah,
that's
simply a whole separate issue as far as what Shannon's talking about. I think for us, and I would guess for Martin and Alpha, I let him answer, but kitchens are, I mean, that's all scheduled work that is done on our, when we're managing a property, we pre-schedule all that in advance. So, and I'm knowing Martin and Alpha, I know they do as well.
I'm going to speak a little bit to what's going on in the commercial real estate world. And what we try to do there is basically risk shifting, shift the risk to somebody else. And in the commercial world, the protocol would be to hire an industrial hygienist. Those are the experts in this, to come in and to establish a protocol and give that to you, and then you follow that. And so if there's an issue, you can look to the IH group and say, well, they wrote the protocol, we're just following it. Now, you may not have that luxury, of course, in this kind of chapter housing, but you could Google industrial hygienists in your market and see if there's anybody that might be able to help. You might find a Fiji that's doing this stuff, you never know. But there are just things that, just in regular cleaning, a friend of mine has done a deep dive on this, and I've learned some things from him that I just had no idea. You don't just use disinfectant. The EPA for any of these disinfectants has what they call a recommended wet time. So this has to sit on a surface for 5 to 10 minutes to be effective. And most people do what they do with Windex. They spray it on and they wipe it off. That doesn't work. And so, there's just things like that. We're not the experts on that, but there are people out there that might be able to help us out, might be able to help your chapter out. Maybe help the IFC out by writing standards. I don't know. It's kind of late in the game to be doing that, but just to make a phone call and say, okay, what's the minimum we should be trying to do right now? And on an ongoing basis, how do we keep protecting the guys in the most vulnerable areas of the house?
If Steve, we've got resources. I know Shanna and her crew's got resources. I haven't checked Martin, but I know they've done webinars on this as well. But we've got all kinds of, we've done webinars on cleaning. There was a webinar Monday night with Holmes Murphy and Pennington with some infectious control people. They gave a fairly good presentation. But there's a lot. If you'll just check out our website, cslmanagement.com or alphamanagement.com or Upper Crust, I think you'll find any of our websites. You'll be able to find a lot of information on cleaning and cleaning protocols, as well as about any other subject that you can think of.
Great. Two things, again, back to housekeeping. If you're not speaking, can you make sure your mic is muted? I'm hearing some squeaking, and that will help everybody. Yeah, thank you, brothers and vendors. That was a great explanation. On that same topic, let's just talk for a quick second, maybe Shayna. Explain the difference between cleaning and sanitizing.
Oh man, I feel like I'm taking my ServSafe test again. So it's really a 3-step. You're gonna clean, sanitize, and disinfect. And so you're wanting to really clean, the dining room is probably that no man's land that happens in whether it's a fraternity or sorority. People eat, sometimes they take their dishes away, sometimes they don't, they leave them. But really the cleaning is to get the food particles off and kind of get the grime off. It's kind of what you think of doing at home. Most of us at home probably aren't sanitizing and disinfecting. Dang, Steve, so it's kind of you think of the 3, you're cleaning, then bleach water is a lot of times, a water mixture is a lot of times what the kitchen will use. You'll see bleach, they're usually in a red container, some type of container. It's got the mix in it.
Yeah.
And that is getting changed out on a regular basis. So it's that bleach water they're wiping down. And then with COVID now, it's a lot that you're putting on, as Jim said, the EPA, the N list. The great thing is in a kitchen, that set time is a lot less. So if you're using Ecolab, it's a micro, I can't even think of the correct name of theirs. They've got a couple different products. Sometimes it's a 5, 10 second, 20 second that it stays wet. So it's not as long as some of the other products from the food service side. So you're just doing all 3 of those: cleaning, getting the grime off, the bleach, and then the EPA, the endless product that needs to sit. That's the one that has to stay wet. But like I said, in food service, I think it's usually like a 5 to 15 second, depending on the product. Part of it is reading it and making sure it's on that EPA list, because we work with a client and those electrostatic cleaners. There is a company that's been out there. There's a lot of them. I'm sure Steve and Martin have run into them. And they're based out of St. Louis, and they are basically they sell the fog machines for light shows, rock concerts. So what they have said is this can be used for COVID. You have to buy this certain product. And so the whole equipment was a lot less than what I have seen. So I contacted somebody within our company and said, hey, tell me about this. And he said, call him, because he goes, I don't think it's right. So as I called, I said, you say you're CDC. And she said, we are CDC in Taiwan. And I went, oh, okay, but not the US. And she goes, no. And I said, can other products be put in this? And she goes, no, only ours. Well, theirs wasn't on the EPN list. So I think part of that, especially in the disinfecting side for COVID, people really need to double check and make sure they're reading everything. And if it's not on the label, calling and asking, because I kind of went, oh, thank goodness I didn't order these. And a national office ordered 4 for every one of their sorority houses across the country, plus the product. And I thought, well, it's not doing anything. So I think that part of it, it's the 3-step. The kitchen is always doing it from their side, but I think really carrying it through the dining room is going to be really important for everybody.
And I'm sorry, I kind of set you up there. What I was trying to hoping that you go to And brothers, I think this is something that we just are, again, we're all learning about, right? There's a difference between cleaning and sanitizing. You know,
Yep.
cleaning, as Shana alluded to, is dirt removal. Sanitizing is pathogen, you
Yep.
know, killing and cleaning. I use cleaning in both words. I shouldn't have done that. But so one of the things that I think we need to be cautious about is understanding that everything in your chapter house doesn't necessarily need to be sanitized. In the kitchen world, Shanna, right?
Yep.
You're gonna sanitize your cutting
Yep.
board, but
Yep.
you're not gonna sanitize the wire racks that your dry goods are sitting on.
No. We
And,
would at the beginning of the school year as we
right.
clean and sanitize, but yeah.
And so we just need to be careful, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of companies and people out there that are going to be, you know, selling fraternity and sororities, you know, sanitizing services, and we need to be smart about understanding what the CDC and the university guidelines are for what needs to be sanitized versus what needs to be cleaned. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. All right. Other topics that somebody would like to bring up? We've got about 6 minutes left.
I would just say this, you know, just from an informational, is Stephen Martin talked about communicating with parents, is I think the other big thing is also letting them know, because the House Corporation Board has to make that decision. Are they supplying all the cleaning products for the members' bedrooms, or are you letting them know you need to come with your own cleaning products? Because we all know, men or women, you know, they're not the best at cleaning their rooms. And so I think the more you can let them know and communicate early, so that a mother, because I always say they're our worst, is not wanting to know where, you know, Bob's cleaning stuff is for her room, and she should have brought it for her son. So I think that's just part of it. I think the cleaning for all of us, the masks and social distancing and cleaning is huge. And I know for some of us, we find it very hard to believe people don't wash their hands, but I spent yesterday printing and laminating hand washing signs to put in the bathrooms of my own sorority house. And I thought, I have to, just to do a CYA, I've got to do it, and can say I put it up there. And if you haven't figured it out in the, what, 5 months you've been self-distancing and at home, but from a liability, I kind of go, I am doing everything I can. Now it comes up to them as a 18 to 22-year-old to accept some of their own responsibility.
Remember what you learned in kindergarten. This is Steve Ratterman again. One thing that we're seeing, and I don't know what Martin and his crew are, but our clients are all telling everybody to bring their own personal protective equipment, to bring their own cleaning supplies for their rooms, and those kinds of things. So they're trying to put some onus back on the members to do the right thing as well, which frankly, again, I think we all need to be doing. But certainly that is the trend. I don't see anybody offering to clean anyone's individual rooms. So
That's a great point. Any other House Corporation people on the call? Have you addressed that in your local situation?
I'm in Michigan. We put a short sentence into our contract for the lease that the responsibility for keeping the room would be up to the individual, and that we are going to do our best, but we can't guarantee that we can cover the COVID problem.
Great. Anybody else? All right, any other topics that anybody wants to bring up before we wrap up? Okay, hearing none. Brothers, I want to thank you for joining us tonight on our webinar on making 2020 your best year ever. We really hope that you'll share this with brothers from your House Corporation organization that weren't able to join us live. This will be on the phigam.org website under the graduate tab under the housing section, and you can navigate to webinars. Usually DO has these up in 2 to 4 days, so we would love for you to encourage others to listen in on this. We thank you for sharing part of your evening with us. My thanks to Jim and John for joining us and participating and helping with us tonight. And as always, thank you, Dio. Yeah, we are here for you. So if you have questions about housing, you can go to the Phigam website and find contact information for 1848 Housing, or if you want to contact headquarters, ask for Dio, and he can be a intermediary and get your questions or thoughts or concerns to us. Again, thank you for your service, and we wish you a good night.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks all.
Thank you.